Welcome to Your Vote on Your TV, where this time we're focusing on candidates in the Bay of Quinte riding. It's your opportunity to see what the candidates have to say about their own preferences, party platforms, and a chance to discuss all the relevant issues. My name is Paul Martin, usual host of Beyond the Politics here on Your TV. Joining me today, in order, from my immediate left, the NDP's Stephanie Bell, Green Party's Erica Charlton, Conservative Party's Ryan Williams, and representing the Liberals, Neil Ellis. We'll have opening statements, which will last 2 minutes. Then we'll have a series of questions which have been pre-selected with the help of members of the community, such as yourself, who have submitted them ahead of time. And then at the end, we'll have a chance for a 1-minute summation from each of the candidates. In between, if someone wishes to rebut a point made about their person or their party, they may raise their hand and they may have 30 seconds for that. Other than that, each question shall be answered in turn in 1-minute increments. Without further ado, we'll get right into the first opening statement, which will be delivered by Stephanie Bell. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Paul. Hi there, folks. Hi again. This is my second time coming to you as the NDP candidate for the Bay of Quinte. I want to come to you here again to tell you about how important I think the elections are, how important I think the issues are, how much I think that this election matters and that choosing differently matters. On September 20th, we have an opportunity to make different choices. And I believe that we are ready for better. We are better than this. We're better than the scandals. We're better than the lies and the misinformation. We deserve better representation. The past 18 months have shown us that Canadians are ready for any challenge, that we can live with new normals, that we can try for more. It has also shown us that many of the supports that we often rely on are not there when we need them. People need affordable housing. They desperately, desperately need homes. Our healthcare system is not what it should be. We need dental care, eye care, mental health services. And this is being promised year after year. We talk about these issues, and yet they're not addressed. And so I know people want to vote red, blue, but I honestly believe we deserve better than that. And I honestly believe that Jagmeet is the leader that we need, and that I would represent you really well in the House of Commons, and that the NDP is better than this, and that you deserve that. Thank you so much.
Speaking second for the opening statements, representing the Green Party, Erica Charlton. You have 2 minutes, starting now.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. It's been quite a journey since I joined the Green Party. And I feel like I'm getting to know so much more about the Bay of Quinte with just speaking with these other candidates and hearing what they have to say being the priorities for this area. And I think that speaks to a very important piece about being the Green Party candidate, in that I don't consider myself a leader for our local riding. I consider myself a representative that is going to take our national platform and consider our community needs and find a spot in between where they meet, and that everybody can look towards us for having solutions for our issues that we're experiencing right now. Another thing is I like about this job is I can't quite find the motivation for a lot of people for being green that's universal. Everybody has their own unique perspectives on it, and reasons why they want to choose green policies first. And from that, I get to experience new reasons why people want to preserve the environment around here, and also emphasize understandings of how important a social relief program would be and how much it would help. What I think brings a different perspective than most of our other candidates here is that my experience in wireless communications meant that I directly worked with the financial needs and constraints of a demographic of Canada that literally included everybody from all ages, backgrounds, and status. So what that dialogue has done with thousands of Canadians is giving me a pretty clear picture about who spends money, who has money, and who needs money. So from that, this experience today, I think I'm going to bring in even more from that, and I can use those experiences to answer some of our questions. Thanks so much.
Speaking third, representing the Conservative Party, Ryan Williams. You have 2 minutes, starting now.
Thank you, Paul. I'm just so happy to be here today. As other candidates have mentioned, It's just fantastic to be able to be here to talk about the future of the Bay of Quinte. And our campaign from the Conservative Party is Secure the Future. And I think no better time to talk about change as we've gone through the heartaches and the headaches of COVID-19 and the stresses of families and what they're seeing and going through right now as they struggle through this, and the future of what is here for our children and for the future of people that are going to find this great place their home. I'm passionate, I'm innovative, I get the job done. And for 17 years, as long as I can remember, I've been focused on building this great region, the Bay of Quinte. We have a credible program, or credible platform from the Conservative Party called Secure the Future. And it offers a clear choice of a new direction, of a chance to build this country up again, to look at jobs, housing, and mental health, versus government that'll just keep driving up our debt. We're finally seeing inflation take hold, and everyone is affected by it. It's going to be fixing solutions or fixing problems that we face here in this region versus finding no solutions and band-aiding these solutions with again, money. We need a government that is focused on a plan to secure the future, which includes securing jobs, securing the economy, securing accountability, securing mental health, securing our country, and securing our environment. I am very excited to earn your vote and work hard for you in the Bay of Quinte as we continue to make sure we solve those problems, make sure we secure the future. On September 20th, please vote Williams and vote Conservative. Thank you.
And our final opening address is determined by draw before this event. Representing the Liberal Party, Neil Ellis. You have 2 minutes, starting now.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Your TV, for organizing this debate. And welcome to my fellow candidates and those joining us from home. I'm committed to moving forward for everyone. Being born and raised in Belleville, I understand our Bay of Quinte community. Over my career, I proudly fought for seniors, military members, veterans, families, youth, housing, infrastructure, nonprofit organizations, and small businesses. Putting you first has been at the core of my career, whether it's a small business owner in our community, as mayor for the city of Belleville, or as your member of parliament. Since becoming your MP, we've brought over $450 million in federal funding to the Bay of Quinte by working with provincial, municipal, and county partners. Together, we have made enormous improvements in the community members' lives. That $450 million in federal funding has helped us to build affordable housing, bring high-speed broadband, support families and children. This is only the beginning of our work. Our re-elected Liberal government will work hard to build a better future for all Canadians by focusing on bringing $10 daycare, helping Canadians who dream of home ownership, strengthening a public health care system. As your MP, I'm proud to say not only we have brought real results to our community, but we have brought a realistic plan for our future. A plan that puts you first, believes that climate change is real, and moves everyone forward. On September 20th, please vote Neil Ellis so together we can continue building on our accomplishments. Thank you.
This concludes our opening statements. We'll now proceed to the questions section. A reminder for you at home and as well for everyone here on stage. Each person will have a chance to answer each question for a maximum of 1 minute. You will each have an opportunity to speak. If someone challenges another person or party directly, they may be afforded time through rebuttal of up to 30 seconds as adjudicated by the moderator, which is me. So without further ado, we'll go to the first question, answering in order again from the predetermined draw. Immediately to my left, question number 1. Canadians want to know what the long-term plan is for dealing with COVID-19. If elected, what approach would your party take to balance the well-being of the economy and the safety of all residents in your riding? Candidate Bell, you will answer first. You have 1 minute, starting now.
Yeah, okay. How do we deal with COVID-19 moving forward? So our party is in favor of the vaccination passports. We want to make it possible for people, if they want to travel, that they can do that, but they can do it in a safe manner. I know that it is a very divisive subject right now. I know there's a lot of frustration, misunderstanding around vaccinations, and I understand why that is. I understand that people are feeling unsafe. They feel like they have not been heard. They feel like they don't understand what the vaccines are. And so I think that there's still so much education to be done by our governments, and I think that traditionally, I think that people don't trust healthcare and our governments and what they're saying right now because they've been lied to so many times. So I think there's like this feeling of distrust generally because we haven't been trustworthy as a governing body. We haven't been trustworthy and good at disseminating information. And I think we've had a lack of education generally speaking.
And that's time.
Thanks.
Thank you. Answering this question second, Candidate Charlton, you have 1 minute starting now.
Thanks. I think our long-term plan needs to involve communication between our healthcare professionals and our party leaders. We need to stop using science as partisan politics tactics and get universal agreement on the approach that we need to be taking in the media with all our constituents and supplying the exact same message across the board. Canada cares about the people that live here. Enough that we are using the health advice of our top professionals that we hire, because we hire the best people in the country to make these decisions or suggestions for us, and give them to us in a way that we can understand. And that's the way that we need to approach COVID going forward, is not having people using the science, using the misinformation to get people divided and angry with each other, instead of finding a commonality that will keep us together and strong as we persevere through this.
Thank you. Answering this question third, Candidate Williams, you have 1 minute beginning now.
Thank you. And our party believes that we absolutely have to get as many people as we can vaccinated, and also make sure that we keep the economy open. My fellow candidate said it perfectly. Communication has been terrible, and government has to be responsible for communicating with its citizens to ensure that we have the right information, that we're all safe, and that we're doing this together. I'll have to give a hand and a shout out to all the leaders last night who recorded a message together that all said, let's make vaccination paramount to this country and the success of getting through COVID. But communication, when we go to how we've handled this and the continuation of this, has to be on cue. We have to ensure that we're saying the same message, that we're getting that out to people, that no, they're not going to be fired if they are still needing education and need time to get through this, that yes, the vaccine is safe, and making sure that we get that information out to people, that, you know, if we mix vaccines, it's only good for so long, or what have you. The government has failed in its communication. We have to ensure that in the future we're communicating properly.
And that's time. Thank you. Answering this question fourth, Candidate Ellis, you have 1 minute starting now.
And I guess we can mark that something that we all agree on is vaccines, and I think that everybody needs to put their whole heart into getting vaccinated to not only protect our community but protect each other. As COVID-19 hit, we came up with many programs that have saved our economy. The Canadian Emergency Business Account, over 880,000 businesses took advantage of this small business loans. We had the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, which over 450,000 businesses took advantage of this. Canadian Emergency Rent Subsidy, over 200,000 businesses have taken advantage of this. Highly effective sector credit availability also. So we've put the place in COVID, we have put the programs in place. The CERB, which actually helped a $2,000 payment to everybody, has been starting to wind down, but we have our finger on the button. If these programs are needed or needed farther, we have extended a lot of them, and we'll continue to extend as the economy picks up. Thank you.
Moving on to our second question, which also deals with COVID. This is, of course, a very large area and has been dominating discussion now for the past 18 months. Question number 2. Briefly explain your ideas on vaccine passports for travel and/or work and mandatory vaccines for federal workers. We'll begin this second question with Candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute beginning now.
Right now, the government has had to in place regulations like the vaccine passport, because there's been such a discrepancy of information that people are receiving for the safety and security of it, and made it so that they can't make that decision on their own and have to be forced into it. While there are lots of governments all over the world that have decided on the vaccine passport, I think we always can use those kind of examples when we're having difficulty in our own country getting the results that we need. And so that's where that's come from. Sorry, can you just tell me the second part of the question?
Where you stand on mandatory vaccines for federal workers.
Right. So let's talk about what mandatory vaccines means, because I think, again, there's a lot of discrepancy between what people understand about that. Mandatory vaccination does not mean that you need to get a needle in your arm or you will be fired. It means that you will have other restrictions on the way that you go about your work day that will change depending on your
and that's time.
Situation.
Thank you. Answering that question second, Candidate Williams, you have 1 minute starting now.
Yeah, so again, we're following the science and we're going to follow best practices across the world right now. When it comes to passports and mandatory vaccines for federal employees, we have to ensure that we have the science and we're doing it the right way. Mandatory does not mean we strap people down, pull them out of their homes, and jab a vaccine in them. It means we're educating individuals. We make sure that they have choices. And the choice right now, as the federal government has stated many times, is that you have a choice for a vaccine or you have a negative COVID test. Israel is following this exact lead right now. And in their vaccine passports, the COVID test is good for 72 hours. It's not separating one part from the other. It's ensuring their safety, that we educate people. As a government, we tell people to get vaccines and educate them. We don't force them. And at the end of the day, we then come back and to say, this is how we're going to get through this as a country. It's very simple. When it comes to mandatory, I'll just say this right now. On page 51 of the Liberal platform, they had that they were going to change legislation to ensure that employers wouldn't be
and that's time.
fined for, anyway, I'll talk about that later.
Yes, our party agrees with federal employees being vaccinated, which includes airplanes to travel on, trains, and federal businesses. A vaccination passport, we've allowed the Ontario governments, we've allowed provincial governments funding to do passports, which I do agree with. Thank you.
Answering this question fourth, candidate Bell, you have 1 minute starting now.
It's good to hear that we're all pretty much in agreement on this issue. I'm glad to hear that we all feel that the science is worth taking seriously and that we're not debating that people should get vaccinated if they can get vaccinated. I do understand that there will be exemptions. I do understand that some people have medical conditions that should be accommodated. I think this is a larger discussion and it's complex like so many issues are. And I'm really in agreement with Erica here about how, you shouldn't have to get fired. I think that you should be able to have accommodations made if you're still feeling reluctant. And I think that's not necessarily, I'm not saying that as a part of my party's policy. I'm saying personally, I feel like people need to be given time to make decisions for themselves because as a woman, I respect people's autonomy of their body. I do. And I want that for myself as well. So I think that that's something that we need to consider really well and that we're not marginalizing more people through the vaccine passports. It's not done only online. We need to make sure that people who don't have ID can still use it. So there's a lot of discussion to be had about vaccine passports.
Thank you. Our third question is a video submission. We went to members of the community to submit questions, and every question tonight has been submitted in some way, shape, or form. 3 came to us by video format. So without further ado, here is question number 3.
Hey folks, Doug here from the Bay of Quinte Regional Marketing Board. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. So, I'm going to set the frame here. The pandemic has affected the tourism sector in dramatic ways. Regions like ours here in the Bay of Quinte have felt the impact, and our organization in particular has seen the loss of hundreds of thousands of dollars through what's called the municipal accommodation tax. When people don't stay in hotels, money is not generated through this tax. This has obviously greatly affected our ability to attract visitors here to both compete with other destinations, but also to generate more income in order to market and support our local small businesses. So in 2020, funding was made available through the federal government's Regional Recovery and Relief Fund for destination marketing organizations like ours. While this was helpful, the pandemic continues. The funding has not. So my question is, how does your party propose to support destinations like ours in their efforts to attract visitors and drive economic activity back to normal levels? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson, for submitting that question. First to answer is candidate Williams. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson, and this is kind of my wheelhouse. I was chair in Bay of Quinte Tourism for about 7 years and helped evolve the tourism industry in this area. And I'll tell you, it employs thousands of people. It might be our single biggest employer and brings millions of dollars into this area a year. To answer your question, we have massive programs that are going to help stimulate the economy and ensure that tourism is front and center. Tourism was affected the most as it was for retail and for restaurant. And we have a program called Shop and Stay that we're going to implement right away, which is going to ensure that we on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday give 50% off to people that travel and eat in destinations. And if you're going to somewhere like Banff or Toronto, you can also get some good deals on your hotel rooms. The second thing we're going to be doing is ensuring we put a lot more money into destination. And for myself, it was always about turkey to turkey, which we called was October to Easter. It was Thanksgiving to Easter, but we're going to put some more money to build up this great tourism sector in this region.
Thank you. Answering this question second, candidate Ellis. You have 1 minute starting now.
And thank you for the question. As the pandemic hit, we came out with many things, as I said before, that Main Street businesses could take advantage of. Some of those things that I mentioned before was the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, Canadian Rent Subsidy. Also in this region, we had a Main Street $500,000 for Main Street Pectin tourism businesses for startups, and that's for startups to keep continuing on during COVID. In our platform, we have availability for businesses to pivot. During COVID, many businesses had to pivot to an online platform. We're offering funds to provide online platforms for businesses and to hire students, 30,000 of them, to provide services to provide on an online platform. Thank you.
Answering this question third, candidate Bell. You have 1 minute starting now.
I want to address the municipal accommodation tax because I work in the service industry. I'm wearing server black right now. I'm going to go to work right after this because there was no one to replace me because we're so short of people working where I live, PEC, but also Belleville, Trenton, to work in the service industry that I'm not replaceable at this point. And the municipal accommodation tax was necessary so that we can generate some funds so that our municipal governments can afford to build affordable housing or support small businesses or continue to support the BIAs. And I think it's super important. I think instead of trying to make up for that accommodation tax, which is supposed to go towards those kinds of initiatives, I think we need to support small businesses in other ways, like wage subsidies, like making sure that we have Pharmacare, like making sure that we have full-fledged healthcare, because employers can't provide those benefits right now, and those are things that people as workers, we desperately need. So I think that's a better way of accommodating small businesses.
Final answer on this question, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thanks. I like to comment that when the pandemic started, I immediately thought, oh, the tourism section is going to suffer the worst out of all of this. Not being able to travel, people not being able to go to work and experiencing things that mostly require, social interaction. But that also touches on another part that I've realized since becoming candidate is that the pandemic has affected every sector of Canada and that everybody is needing support. So at this point, I think that we can all agree that focusing on something like a guaranteed livable income is going to help transition the entire country over into a sustainable and financially stable environment for themselves. This isn't going to be the first pandemic, the last pandemic that we experienced. This isn't going to be the last financial crisis that Canada experiences. And if every time our tourism section is going to take a hit first, we need to create a support system that's going to allow all Canadians in industries that would be susceptible to crisis mode in advance so that we're not trying to compensate later for them.
Thank you. Question number 4. Canada's debt is now over $1 trillion, that's trillion with a T, and the deficit last year was around $354 billion. How will your party reduce debt and deficit to more manageable levels? Answering this question first, candidate Ellis. You have 1 minute starting now.
Just want to first start to say COVID has hit us hard, and I don't think we've had, we haven't had this type of economic downfall or possibility of economic downfall since World War II. Our deficit right now predicted for 21-22 is $121 billion. From there, it'll drop the next year to $50 billion and to $25 billion. But we will be investing in communities, such things like doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, infrastructure, climate change. These are investments that build our communities, that build our neighborhoods, and growth. Growth is what will happen with investing. Thank you.
Answering this question second, candidate Bell. You have 1 minute starting now.
I want to talk about reducing the debt by talking about taxation. So fair taxation, making sure that we close corporate tax loopholes, making sure that those who are the wealthiest are paying their fair share, that they are paying their fair share of taxes like the rest of us, so that this debt that we're talking about isn't placed on the back of regular working people like you and me. year after year, we hear about corporations and companies that are not paying taxes. They're foreign, they put their money somewhere else, and we need to work on actually holding these people to account because they are making profit off of us, not the other way around. So we need them, but they need us as well, and they should be paying their fair share. So I think that's one of the ways we can hopefully reduce the debt.
Answering this question third, candidate Charlton, you have 1 minute starting now.
Well, unfortunately, this pulls out of my closing statement to answer this question because I thought that it was something that we need to address, and I didn't expect it to be brought up in this way. I don't believe that we need to continue to tell Canadians that they are responsible for the debt that has been incurred by governments that have failed them previously. I think that we need to take it into consideration, but like any good business operation, the first thing you need to do is create a balanced budget, something that where you're investing as much into your people as you're returning from. And only at that point when we can say that Canada is doing a good job financially can we start looking at different areas of ways that we can increase the revenue to pay back all of this debt that the Liberals and Conservatives have handed off on us. Thanks.
Final answer on this question, candidate Williams, you have 1 minute starting now.
Look, we're the only party right now that has a plan to actually balance the budget in the next 10 years. So we're not going in by cutting, we're actually expanding programs, and what we're doing is we're growing the country. We're growing jobs. We're going to be a country that makes stuff again and creates jobs and gets people off of CERB and into work. And when we do that, you create wealth. And in this country, half of our GDP comes from natural resources. We're going to start making sure we increase innovation. Here in this region, we're going to get back to things that I was doing with Quinnovation, some more tech and agriculture, and making sure we produce things in Bay of Quinte that are great to provide great jobs for people. We increase tourism, we increase our livelihoods here, and we just get people back to work. We have a lot of different things we have to fix, including housing and others. People cannot afford inflation right now because of higher taxes. And the more that we spend, the more we take on debt, the more you're going to pay, and the more that Canada suffers.
We now move on to question number 5, which is another question that was submitted by video. So without further ado, this question from the Quinte-West Chamber of Commerce.
Workforce shortages have become a big issue in our region. And what would you do, if elected, to ensure that businesses could find the available workforce they needed to grow their businesses?
Answering this question first, candidate Bell, you have 1 minute starting now.
I love talking about this because I love referring to this in a way that we need to retrain people. We need to provide affordable, easy access to education because our workforce, our young people, Erica and I, it's really expensive for us to go back to school if we want to. I went to school, I still have student debt, and it really limits my ability to want to go back to school, to want to get retrained, and to want to go into a new job field. So I think we've really limited our job sector by not providing affordable education and retraining. On top of that, I want to address that I think we need to look at immigration. Having more folks come here is great for everybody. It builds up our workforce. There are trained people around the world that can do jobs that we have. And if we're lacking in people to work, we need to look at doing that as well.
Answering this question second, candidate Charlton, you have 1 minute starting now.
I think if we want to get people back into the workforce, we really need to consider why we have the shortages we have. And that needs to come from obviously canvassing and understanding where people our heads are at, but let's be real, our workforce feels undervalued. We feel stretched beyond our capabilities. We're stressed financially. We don't get dental care for working these jobs that people expect us to work. We don't get Pharmacare for participating in society. We are expected to work jobs where they will make sure your hours don't quite meet the provincial legislation so you can get the benefits that you need. These are the workplaces that we have, and if we want to encourage people to go back into work, what we're going to have to do is reassess the situation and see if there's any way that we can better support people to understand that they are valuable and they are needed.
And that's time. Thank you. Answering this question third, candidate Williams, you have 1 minute starting now.
I know that going into this job, it's going to be almost like juggling, because we're going to have to handle a bunch of different things in order to solve this. One is housing. We need housing, we need to get people back to work for that, and that's skilled trades. That's working with our industries to make sure we can get housing up. And number two then is the workforce. And it has been mentioned already, yes, absolutely immigration, but it's also training employees into better jobs and making better paychecks. We have $10,000 that'll be available to those that want to train into better jobs to be able to use that time to get into a skilled job that's available now. Over 3,000 jobs sit empty in this region. Number two, we're going to be doing, and I'm hoping when I'm elected, to sit with every employer and start looking at exactly what we need and how we're going to go after it. We're going to be talking to the different industries. We're going to be talking to the Workforce for Center for Workforce Development and Brad Labadie, working with QEDC, the chambers, and all the businesses in the area. You know, something we really looked at when we were trying to attract people here through Bay of Quinte Living 10 years ago was a website called Quinte Jobs, where we promoted not just the great jobs, but the great lifestyle here. And when we look right to our closest neighbor in Toronto, we've got millions of people who are already moving here, but millions of people who could fill a skilled workforce position. We need to be proactive in it, and I'm going to help do that from the federal government.
Answering fourth, candidate Ellis. You have 1 minute starting now.
And thank you for the question. The workforce shortage was before COVID. We've been experiencing a worker shortage in this area and across Canada for a while. Part of this is the reason of the baby boom, retiring. Right now, we have to get more people in the workforce by migration, having people move from bigger cities or smaller cities to this great area, or immigration. And we filled a lot of our jobs around the area with international students. We are having such programs now in the riding for retraining. Elevate Plus comes to mind in Quinte West for retraining people in the food sector. We have meta employment that we fund too for retraining students. Retraining is very important to get people back in the workforce. I think overall, this is an issue that all three levels of government have to work on, and our shortage of Red Seal also. We are putting programs in place to bring more Red Seal trades, also doctors. And
that's time. Thank you. Question number 6 is on infrastructure spending. Our local area is seeing the benefits of programs like Build Belleville. How does your party plan to invest in important infrastructure areas, and what is your party's overall infrastructure vision? Answering this question first, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
Our plan around infrastructure starts with acknowledging that the affordable housing situation in Canada is a crisis, and by providing the country with a minister of housing that will appropriately make a switch from a society that views housing and infrastructure as commodities, and taking away from the fact that our businesses can only run when we have affordable places for them to do their business, and our people can only work in areas that have transit and affordable housing for themselves. When we discussed the tourism market before, one of the major problems with our tourism industry is that people can't afford to live close to the jobs that they are expected to do. So it's going to come from a national effort and a serious consideration of our regional borders and where we can improve the infrastructure.
Thank you. Answering this question second, candidate Williams. You have 1 minute starting now.
We have an incredible plan to get infrastructure moving right away. The Liberal government set up an infrastructure bank that has $6 billion sitting in it, and yet a lot of it has been unspent. It hasn't been used. We've reached out during the election to all of our municipal leaders. We've had Aaron O'Toole down to the region, and he's committed to ensure we release that money as soon as we can and we get projects flowing as soon as we can. Additionally to that, a big investment in this area, a great center of our region is CFB Trenton. And being a veteran himself, that Aaron O'Toole has promised new investments into CFB Trenton, and that we continue to invest in our military. When we're looking at growth of this area, we need infrastructure. Water in Wellington. We need to make sure our roads and our bridges are fixed, and as we look to build housing, we're going to need to make sure that we get water and sewer to those developments so we can get housing up as soon as possible to get out of this housing crisis. We're committed to infrastructure.
Answering third, candidate Ellis. You have 1 minute starting now.
I just wanted to make a note that Under the Harper government, the last year of our budget, they cut funding for our military. With us, we have 10-year funding of $70 billion to increase military funding. You mentioned Build Belleville. Build Belleville was a program that was, was made under my council, and it was to rebuild infrastructure. One of the reasons I took this job, or I applied for this job, was we needed more infrastructure dollars. Stuff like building a new YMCA that we funded, Safe Start money that came to the community for all municipalities. With the City of Belleville rebuilt their parks. City of Quinte-West are working on boat launches. It's all about getting money to the riding. Infrastructure money has come into Belleville, such projects as King Street, such projects as City Hall in Picton. Money needs to come, more money needs to come. I brought in over $450 million into the riding, and I will be bringing more. Thank you.
Final answer on this question, Candidate Bell. You have 1 minute starting now.
I want to frame this in a climate action manner, because I think that infrastructure and climate action are going to go together hand in hand, and the NDP party has been talking about this for years. We would like to see infrastructure building happening in the framework of thinking about being carbon neutral, building new homes that are net zero emissions, retrofitting homes so that we're reducing our emissions, reducing our pollution, and making sure that those homes are in fact cheaper to run. So it saves people money. It saves us in the long run from running out of fossil fuels to fuel our country and burning up our planet and destroying it in the process by building things. So I think it's really important when we're talking about infrastructure that we're also thinking about climate action. They go hand in hand. We want to build affordable housing for sure. What else did I want to say to you? I guess I want to say that we also need to make sure that in the process of, I apologize. So much to say.
And I also must apologize. Candidate Williams, you wanted to have a rebuttal after Candidate Ellis spoke. I've decided to allow that because he referred to something that your party did directly before. You have 30 seconds for a rebuttal to his point, starting now.
Thank you. And I just want to address the comment on CFB Trenton and the military. We actually, the Conservative government invested the most amount of money in the history of this region, over $1 billion into CFB Trenton. Before the last government left, we were promised JTF2 into that, and as soon as your government got in, you canceled that. And I'll speak just personally. My father was a big advocate. He was the honorary colonel of CFB Trenton, big advocate, and we were all disappointed in this region of the millions of dollars in jobs that we lost because of that canceled project.
If you wish, you may have 15 seconds for a counterpoint. Candidate Ellis, do you wish that 15 seconds?
Still cut money to CFB Trenton funding.
Moving on to question number 7. This question is our final question submitted by video, so without further ado, one for community care for seniors.
My name is Debbie MacDonald-Moynes, and I'm the Executive Director of the Prince Edward County Community Care for Seniors Association. Our agency has been providing services to help seniors live at home in the community for over 44 years. At home is where seniors want to age. What will your government do to ensure that all seniors have access to the required supports so that they can live in their own homes in the community for as long as possible?
Answering this question first, Candidate Williams. You have 1 minute to respond, starting now.
Thank you very much for your question, and we absolutely agree with you on investing in our seniors. Our seniors have given so much and built this country. It's time now that we look after them. Our government has promised $60 billion in health transfers to the provinces for PSWs, for mental health, and to ensure we have doctors and nurse practitioners. And part of that with the PSW is to ensure you stay in your home as long as possible. I've talked to so many individuals and seniors walking across the doors who have said, they're having trouble making ends meet with higher inflation right now. They don't know how they're going to afford to get to the next step. Even some seniors today who told me they're having a hard time getting money that they were promised. Some seniors who got $500 if they're 75 or older and felt discriminated that 65 to 74 didn't receive a thing. We're going to invest in you, we're going to keep you in your home, and we're going to take care of you.
Answering this question second, Candidate Ellis. You have 1 minute, starting now.
We're the first government to appoint a senior minister, Deb Schultz, which is a close friend of mine. The first thing we did when we got into government, the Conservative government raised the age of retirement to 67, which put many seniors back into the poverty role. We lowered the retirement back to age 65, which enabled them to collect GIS and OAS. We will put money into mental health funds and sustainable funding for free mental health. We are going to hire 50,000 PSA workers, obviously to help retirees to stay in their home. We're investing $3.2 billion in doctors, and we are raising our home tax credit to have seniors more money when they live at home.
Answering this question third, candidate Bell. You have 1 minute starting now.
These issues that we're talking about tonight are so interconnected. The same issues that are affecting seniors are affecting young people. The same things that are affecting young people are affecting families, because we all need affordable housing. If you have affordable housing, you can afford to stay in your home. So that's one way we can help our seniors. We need to have a national senior strategy. So we need to all be on the same page about what we're going to do for seniors, so that it's not just like hodgepodge, every province doing something different. They should have autonomy, but we should also know nationally what we want for seniors. Having a guaranteed basic income is so important, so that folks are not just relying on OAS, but instead have a guaranteed income that they know that they can pay their bills. Lastly, I want to say that they have access to Pharmacare for sure. Medication isn't withheld. Right now, we know in Ontario, we just lost eye care for seniors. And that was a Conservative government. So we know that we keep hearing that they're going to fund things, but I don't believe it.
That's time. Answering last in this particular question, candidate Charlton, you have 1 minute starting now.
I think that this question speaks a lot to mentality. A lot of people are feeling in this area, particularly because we have such a great population of seniors around here, is that they worked their entire lives. They worked hard, and they expected Canada to be there for them when they exited the workforce and wanted to enjoy the rest of their lives that they had. At this point, a lot of people's pensions are being gambled by big business, and we need to put a restriction on that for the when a company is dissolved, that money isn't being pulled out first. People had spent their lives depending on that money just to have it taken away from them. Secondly, we need to reconsider the fact that a lot of people who want to stay in home don't have that option because they don't have the caregiver support. Even the people that would like to stay home and help take care of them and keep them in their home for the longest can't take time off work to do that without a financial crisis happening.
Moving on to question number 8. Thousands of unmarked graves belonging to children who attended residential schools in Canada have been discovered over the course of this past year. Where does your party stand on reconciliation, and where do we go from here? Answering this question first, candidate Ellis. You have 1 minute starting now.
Yes, and it's been a troubling time over the past years of what we have done and what we have done here in Canada and what we haven't done in action. The Truth and Reconciliation Agreement was 94 recommendations. So far, action on those recommendations, 14 have been done, 23 have been actioned and financed, 37 are at the table, and 20 have had no work on yet. It's about things like boiled water drinking advisories. When we first started, there was over 100 boiled water advisories on reserves. It was recommended by Barlow report that over $4.5 billion had to be spent to end water advisory boiling. We have spent $4 million. We have eliminated over 100 boil water issues, but there's 50 more that have popped up. We are working on this. We are putting the necessary funds toward it.
Answering this question second, candidate Bell. You have 1 minute starting now.
I wanted to acknowledge the territory that we're on today that was traditionally of the people of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat people. And I want to also acknowledge the territory right beside us of the Mohawk people. I want to acknowledge how much they have brought to our society, how much I appreciate having the nation-to-nation situation, and yet we're still coming to terms with genocide and the trauma that they have experienced. And we need to come to a national agreement about what we're going to do beyond just the 94 agreements. You know, that's just the bare minimum, because we have been a traumatized society, and we need to acknowledge the genocide. We need to not pretend that it didn't happen, and we need to come to nation friendship amongst ourselves. And we need to talk about it on a daily basis. And I believe this is an issue that we'll be dealing with for another 100 years, because we will have to continue to live with the repercussions of what happened.
That's time. Thank you. Answering this question, third candidate, Charlton, you have 1 minute starting now.
I think the first step starts with education. We need to educate all Canadians on the reality of what Canada was formed on first, so that we can get everybody on board with the fact that reconciliation needs to happen immediately. The second point I wanted to talk about is that we keep getting asked this question in every debate, and no one has a specific answer for it, because we're not reading the documentation. We've already been given the steps that we need to properly transition into a reconciled state, but we're not looking at them. Every time it comes a conversation about things that we could resolve, we put restrictions on them that are dependent on Canada's economy and Canada's social status, and that's what we need to annihilate if we're actually going to take this seriously. We have the information. We need to listen to what we're being told and enact on those policies, and not policies that a bunch of white people at podiums trying to say that are priorities.
Final answer on this question, candidate Williams, you have 1 minute starting now.
The biggest things we need to be doing are listening. We need to be communicating. We need to take action. It's as simple as that. We have been listening. We've had a report, but there was no action taken on it for 5 or 6 years. We have water boil advisory in Canada. In Canada, it doesn't make any sense. We need to fix it, and if a government can't do it, we need another government to come in and do just that. If that's one action item, there are many, many more, and we know them and we've read them, that we have to take action on. And we certainly have to have our Indigenous partners at the table. You know, learning and going through this process, and just the heartache that we watch these stories, is learning just how many nations there are in Canada, over 660. We can't even get 338 electoral districts half the time to get along. We have no choice in this. We need to listen, get to the table, get things fixed, and start moving forward as a country with partnerships.
Question number 9. Please outline your thoughts on developing or improving Canada's national childcare strategy. Answering this question first, Stephanie Bell, you have 1 minute starting now.
I want to say that as a 30-year-old woman, I know that we've been talking about childcare since I was born, that the Liberal government has been saying that they were going to do that since I was born. The Conservative government had every opportunity to do that since I was born. I'm sure my mother would have loved childcare so that she could go to work and not stay home. And I want to acknowledge the marginalization repeatedly of women and women's work and women's labor at the hand of continuously these same governments. I'm so tired of it. And the NDP have put out the same recommendations that the Liberals are offering, and yet, you know, year after year we vote for them, and it's just beyond mind-boggling that we would do that when we know they're not going to do it. We know they're not going to do that. And the NDP have shown repeatedly, over and over again, we do what we say. We're going to do what we offer.
And that's time. Answering this question second, candidate Charlton, you have 1 minute beginning now.
So I just want to be very clear that the Green Party supports universal childcare. We support making sure that there is a spot for every Canadian citizen that needs one. And this is where we need to focus our attention if we want to support our women. We're talking about not struggling to get people into the workforce when 50% of those people are women, and most of them are the primary childcare responsible for primarily for the childcare in their home. So if you're going to tell a person that we will support you for your childcare up to a certain dollar amount, and then at that point you are on your own, we are not effectively supporting our women. If we are telling them that we do give you a spot for childcare, that you need to make it there on your own, we are not supporting properly. So if we want to do this if we want to do it appropriately, we need universal childcare that is accessible with that being supported by a public transit system that allow people to get to and from work.
Thank you. Answering third, candidate Williams. You have 1 minute starting now.
Our party supports universal childcare, and we really believe that women need to get back in the workplace, and we need to provide every incentive to ensure that families are taken care of. And our child plan is different in the fact that we put the money back into parents' hands to make the choice of where they're sending their children and who to send. At the end of the day, the programs that have been prescribed right now are for 4 and under, but there's parents who need childcare for children after school and preschool, who are 5 and 7 and 9. Our program allows you to make those choices. It allows you then to put your children where they're best to be put. The other thing about our childcare program, merged with our Main Street Business Credit, is we are actually going to create childcare providers. We have $100,000 that we're going to give $25,000 back if you want to be a daycare provider, if you'd like to look after children. We want to create jobs in daycare and also give you the money back so you can spend it the way you need to spend it for your own family.
Candidate Charlton, you raised your hand about a rebuttal point.
Just like to comment that while your plan sounds great, the expectation is there that you need to have money first before you're able to get it back for your childcare, and that's not the position that we're in for a lot of Canadians. A lot of Canadians need to start making money before they can start spending it on childcare.
15 seconds to respond. Candidate Williams.
Absolutely, and those details we worked out in Parliament, and sometimes maybe we could be doing that, but at the end of the day, it still is your money, and you're choosing where to spend your children, and that's our premise. We understand the need for it. We're going to make sure it's done the best way in Parliament for Canadians and their families.
Answering this question fourth, candidate Ellis. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you for the question. And first of all, we have to increase daycare spots. That's a top priority for our Liberal government. As I said before, participation in the workforce for women are at an all-time low over the past 2 decades. Our platform, and we've already signed it with 8 provinces and 1 territory, is to offer $10 a day daycare. In the riding, I've knocked on so many doors and talked to young couples that are paying upwards to $50 to $60 a day in daycare. Our program will allow them to put money in their pockets and save money, and this money can be used towards a car payment or a house. We're not offering a tax incentive. We're offering a real plan that will provide $10 daycare and a plan that Canadians can look up to, and a world national plan on daycare. Thank you.
Question number 10 is on mental health. This is an area that's been receiving more attention lately, especially during the pandemic. Can you outline what your party would do to help address this key issue? Answering this question first, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
When we talk about the mental health of our citizens in Canada, I want to talk about a couple different things. Mental health is affected by trauma. Mental health is affected by your circumstance financially and hereditary as well, but it also is affected by the food that you eat. So what we're seeing right now is that we have a number of workers in Canada that can't afford to live where they're living. They can't afford good food. They can't afford to get the pharmaceutical drugs that they need that could facilitate a healthy lifestyle for them. Because at this point, Canada is divided. We are divided between people with money who can access services that they need and people who don't have the money to access the services that we need. And if we're going to try and tackle the issue of mental health, we need to understand that financial stress is the #1 cause of people to have mental health issues in our country.
And that's time.
And that's it.
Answering second, candidate Williams. You have 1 minute starting now.
I'm so proud of our mental health plan, and it's one of our main pillars for the Conservative government for Secure Your Future. Under our Canada Mental Health Action Plan, we'll be giving $60 billion to the provinces for mental health. Part of that will be to ensure we have counseling and we have treatment beds for those that need it right now. There's a lot of families who can't find a counselor, can't find a psychiatrist. We need help now. During the pandemic, the enrollment for children with clinical depression, children, went up, and sick kids in CHEO by 2. It's absolutely a mental health pandemic. We're going to create a new 3-digit 911-like number for those with, for suicide prevention and for mental health. My spin would be to ensure it's also in 911 as well if we have those resources. And the third thing we're going to do is give $150 million to already existing non-for-profit organizations like the Enrichment Center and the Quinte region so that they can expand their programming and keep doing all the great work that you're doing.
Answering this question, third candidate Ellis, you have 1 minute starting now.
On mental health, we're going to start a new funding stream that will provide free mental health for everybody. This funding will provide the provinces enough money to provide services, free services. We're also making sure that students suffer mainly from a lot from mental health. I believe out of 2 out of 10 students or 2 out of 10 youth suffer from mental health issues. It's important to get counseling on the ground for students. So we're going to go out and make sure students have proper mental health. It's all about funding, and the funding will be there for a better mental health system. Thank you.
Final answer on this question, candidate Bell, you have 1 minute starting now.
The NDP believe that mental health services should be at no cost to the general public. End statement. Your mind is part of your body. Your brain is part of your body. These sorts of things are just, it doesn't make sense that they're not already a part of our general healthcare system. Your mind is in your body. But I want to touch on Erica's point because I agree that a lot of the reason why people have mental health issues is because of lack of access to services, which my compatriots here have repeatedly underfunded for decades. So we have lack of housing, we have poverty, we have people who still don't have dental care. This is very stressful and causes mental health problems. This is part of the reason why people are so stressed, and it has been compounded by COVID and the pandemic. And we know that during the pandemic, a lot of those services were still unavailable to us, and they had every opportunity to continue to offer them to people, and they haven't. They voted down dental care again. So I don't know, how can we trust that?
And that's time. Moving on to question number 11, which is on climate change, which remains a major issue. What would your party do to protect the environment, and does that include a carbon tax? Answering this question first, candidate Williams. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you. We actually have an incredible climate plan, to ensure that we're taking care of our most precious resource, which is our land and here in Canada. And the plan includes ensuring we have money available that we are putting back into our industries, money available that ensures that we are bettering the planet and itself, and money available that keeps the carbon tax in place but goes back into your wallet. And we're going to meet the Paris climate commitment in 2030. We're going to create 30% of our vehicles to be EV by 2030. But most importantly, with this low carbon savings account, you as a family can make the choice yourself on how best to better the climate in your backyard, whether that's to buy an electric vehicle, to buy a bike, to change the windows in your house, or put a new heat pump in your house to better the climate. The climate is going to be changed directly by consumers. Consumers need the money in order to access that and change their own environment in their own backyard.
Answering this question second, candidate Ellis. You have 1 minute starting now.
And I think the question was if we support carbon pricing or pricing on pollution. And we do. And we put more money back into pockets if you do create and save. So there is a tax rebate back on this. Other things in our plan is it's a $100 billion environmental plan. Battery technology, 2 billion trees, canceling the fuel subsidy by 2025. By the year 2035, cars will be all battery operated. Ban plastics. Make sure that plastics that are recycled, plastics that are new that will contain 50% recyclable material. We will meet and exceed our Paris agreements. We have a climate change plan, and we are acting on it. Thank you.
Answering third, candidate Bell. You have 1 minute starting now.
Canada is the only G7 country whose emissions have gone up since the Paris Agreement. Canada has never met a single emissions reduction goal. So when I hear these things from my compatriots here again, disregarding Erica here, I don't believe it. Again, I don't believe it. The Trudeau government still gave $2 billion in subsidies to fossil fuel companies. The Conservatives' plan is not a plan. It's just not going to meet the needs that we have. So I continue to say, if we vote in this way, we're going to continue to get the results that we've been seeing. We need to cut emissions by more than half to meet our 1.5 degree target. That's just the bare minimum. We need to create hundreds and thousands of jobs, good paying jobs with benefits, investing in clean energy and making energy efficient homes, electric transit, and coming back to zero emissions.
That's time. Final answer on this question, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
I think it was pretty clear in the national debate last night that a lot of the parties want to take a serious approach to the climate crisis, and some of them are ignoring that it is in fact a crisis. The Green Party has very clear standards that they want to set for Canada, and those standards are what's going to get us to our climate goals that we've promised internationally. One being we want to reduce our emissions by 60% by 2030 and be net neutral by 2050. We want a fully renewable energy grid. That includes the opportunity for energy surpluses to be transferred interprovincially where we can, so that we can save some of that as well. We want to continue with the carbon tax, as we understand that that is an investment in Canadians' futures, because the inevitable future of a climate crisis is going to be more unaffordable than any of these initiatives. We need Canada to pull funding out of pollutant foreign industries and to use that money to fund green economy, which we can sell internationally.
Question number 12 is on pipelines. There are roughly 70 operating oil and gas pipelines regulated by SUR that operate across the Canada-U.S. border, 31 oil, 39 natural gas. Does your party support building more of these pipelines? First to answer this, candidate Ellis. You have 1 minute starting now.
On pipelines, basically we're trying to get off oil. Right now we have the Trans Mountain pipeline that will go through. Pipelines are a controversial issue and will be looked at individually.
Answering second, candidate Bell. You have 1 minute starting now.
I'm going to mention that this is more of my personal opinion than what I would say the NDP status is. So I'll just put that statement out there that I do not support more pipelines. We've continuously seen that they often are placed through Indigenous territories. They're not in agreement with what we need for our environmental impact, and that we need to move away from fossil fuels. We need to stop subsidizing them, and we need people to move away from those types of jobs and move into a green sector like solar energy, wind power, alternative energy, generally speaking. So I think I just can't support it, and I feel like generally speaking the NDP party does not support it, but I think there's a mixed view out there, and I will be honest about that.
Answering this question third, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
I don't think I need a minute. I think it's pretty clear that the Green Party says no more pipelines, no more purchasing, no more building. Nothing in the area of fossil fuel is going to be a valuable investment for our future, and we have to say no. At this point, it is becoming outdated technology. If we are going to have a resilient Canada that can survive the next 20 years, pipelines are something that we unanimously make a decision to say no to.
The final response on this question, candidate Williams. You have 1 minute starting now.
Look, we understand the environmental crisis, and we know we have to move forward on that. At the same time, this is a global issue. And at the same time, we have a lot of Canadian jobs that depend on our energy sector. So we're going to continue to support our energy sector, while instead of putting a light switch on, use a dimmer to make sure that we're switching to greener technologies as we go down the road. One of the biggest things we can look at when it comes to emissions in this world is China, which is now roughly 56% of all emissions on the planet. If we do not do what we did, I'm going to give props to the Liberal government in Ontario 20 years ago at this point. When we switched from coal-fired power plants to natural gas, we halved the emissions in this province. 20 years ago, you used to hear the news reports and they would start with the air quality index. That's not there because of that and factories that moved to China. We need to address China. We can sell our natural gas to China. If we have incentives with our Indo-Pacific partners, we can actually incentivize them to actually take their coal plants down, make sure we use Canadian natural gas, provide jobs, and have a cleaner global economy.
That's time. Candidate Charlton has requested a rebuttal. You have 30 seconds starting now.
I just want to talk about jobs that were being created on outdated technology. And to put it in perspective, and I know this is kind of severe, but if I were to suggest, let's build a new asbestos factory and we'll provide so many jobs for people, people would tell me, no, that is not safe. We should not be investing in things that are detrimental to our future. And all I can say is for issues like pipelines, that's exactly what that feels like to me.
Response, Candidate Williams, you have 15 seconds.
Comparing asbestos to an industry that provides 2 provinces with a lot of money that goes to the rest of the country, that actually is the most cleanest ethical oil and gas in the world, compared to if we shut it down, countries like Saudi Arabia, who have questionable human rights practices, who would send their oil to us. We can't automatically do it with a switch. We agree we need a change. We need to ensure we protect Canadians and Canadian jobs.
That's time. Moving on to question 13, which is on Pharmacare. National Pharmacare will be a drug plan for all Canadians. Would your party pursue Pharmacare, and more importantly, how would it be funded? We begin this question with Candidate Bell. You have 1 minute starting now.
The NDP as a party is founded on healthcare. We fought for it. Tommy Douglas wanted it. We got it, but we didn't get the system that we wanted. We didn't get all the way. We didn't get a full-fledged healthcare system that takes care of people when they really need it. So we definitely had always planned to have medication for all. That is always part of the plan. We've always been offering that. We've always wanted that for people because it's cheaper in the long run. So right now, it's very expensive to run healthcare, but it might be partly because people don't have access to their medication. I'm a good example of that. I have asthma. If I don't take my medication, I get really sick. I end up in the hospital. It costs more money. $100 for my medication, $400 every time I go through ER. Thousands of dollars every time I go into ICU. So I think it's proactive and saves money by just having the system in place. And it's investing in people. It's just the right thing to do.
Answering this question second, Candidate Charlton, you have 1 minute starting now.
Yes, Pharmacare is part of our platform, and just like Stephanie Bell said, that our long-term success is going to be made on decisions that we make today to support our people. When it comes to Pharmacare particularly, we know that Canadians are paying way more than they need to for the same drugs that are provided in other countries at a discount. So what we would be doing is purchasing these items in bulk and making them accessible to Canadians at a price, or a price that Canada can afford, which is their health. If we're going to pay for it, what we're going to start with is a wealth tax, and we're going to take money that has been put in offshore accounts by avoiding our taxation system and use that to directly fund all of these initiatives for Canadians that will be a long-term investment that we can take back in the future when we have healthier Canadians.
Answering this question third, Candidate Williams, you have 1 minute starting now.
Look, we're going to have a tough time paying for all the things we need right now. The increased mental health that people are finding doctors and nurses, we can't even get those right now. We need to take care of the basics. And yes, down the road, we can start, as we get more money, to start funding everything. I think for our part, we're ensuring that through innovation in Canada and protecting IP, we're going to make sure we have more pharmacare companies that are Canadian, that can produce generic drugs. They're doing this in the U.S. right now to make them cheaper. We're going to make incentives so employers can add more incentives and help to their health plans to offer their employees. And that's something that we can really help. We're doing that with mental health right now. But we have to ensure we balance the budget. If we just give all our money away, your groceries, your gas, the price of everything in your life, including housing, is going to keep going up, and you're not going to be able to afford the basics, let alone the rest. Let's make sure we balance this country.
Rebuttal point, Candidate Bell, you have 30 seconds.
I can't think of an example of during a Conservative government where things got more affordable for people, generally speaking. So I just feel like that's false information, because you're telling people that somehow they're going to have more money in their pockets, but every single time that we have this happen, it doesn't actually happen that way. We get poorer. So I just can't stand by listening to you say that. I can't.
Response, Candidate Williams, you have 15 seconds.
Well, I guess you forget we had an NDP provincial government too that made things really affordable in this country and in this province. But at the end of the day, we're providing great incentives to make sure we get employers to work and getting better paying jobs so they can bring more paychecks home. We're ensuring that we expand companies by giving Main Street tax credits so so people can start businesses in the area, and we're ensuring we make sure we get people working here in the area. That's where they can afford it.
Thank you. Final answer on this question, candidate Ellis. You have 1 minute starting now.
Pharmacare. Do I support Pharmacare? Yes, definitely. As Steph said, people go without meds. It's upstream thinking. It costs more, and it's proven. First of all, lowering the price of drugs, definitely. They need to be lowered in bulk buying. Our government has promised Pharmacare. Have we had a lot of action on it? We're starting. We've had a test pilot. I've signed up with PEI for a test pilot on Pharmacare. It's still in our platform, and I'm going to be there to champion it. Thank you.
Question number 14. The government and Via Rail are discussing massive projects for higher speed trains and new routes between Toronto and Montreal. The new dedicated lines could run between Toronto and Ottawa and then Montreal via Peterborough but not Belleville. Could this have a negative impact on Belleville? Fewer trains, loss of employment, and economic impact. In the greater sense, of course, high-speed rail as a whole. First to answer this, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
I'm going to start by saying that we have not discussed the high-speed rail in our local riding, and so I feel that commenting on that would be inappropriate for me. But at the same time, what it does encourage is national transit system, and that's the most important thing that we could focus on if we want to get our people working. Right now, the issue of affordable housing is creating a situation, like I mentioned before, where people can't actually live near where they work. So if we want to have communities that are sustainable, we need to invest in local transit and get rural zones on the map so that we can get people crossing into Belleville, crossing into Trenton, crossing into Picton to work the jobs that we need them to.
Answering this question second, candidate Williams. You have 1 minute starting now.
Well, I think this could be an incredible green initiative for this area. Of course, if we're upgrading our rail system, they're probably going to be electric. When it comes to moving people, when we talk about a rail right now, what greater initiative than instead of driving your car to the airport, you can take the train to the Union Station and take the up to the airport so that you're not driving your car along the way. I think it's fantastic. I do support that it should be through our riding. It should be going exactly through Belleville and Quinte West and all the way to Montreal. And at this point, we need to make sure we're increasing and improving our rail. And I think it's an important part of this area and this country.
Third response, candidate Ellis. You have 1 minute starting now.
As everybody knows, Via Rail is an arm's length company from the federal government. When we first got in 2015-16, there was talk of high-speed rail going through the corridor. We allowed Via funding to do an assessment of where this would best be taken. This is not a really political decision, it's a Via decision. Yes, it would be great to go through the riding, but we don't, on the corridor here, we do not have the infrastructure. The infrastructure is set up on the other line, and that would be the way it would go, unfortunately.
Final response on this question, candidate Bell. You have 1 minute starting now.
Would you mind repeating? So it's going to go to Peterborough?
Current route has it going through Peterborough as its local hub as opposed to Belleville.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this feels like a very specified, specific question where I'd want to know more about it before I'm answering. It feels like I don't have enough information to adequately tell you about what I think should be done. Of course, I want transit to come through the Bay of Quinte. Of course, I want it to come through Belleville, Trenton. I would love it if it came to PEC, to be frank, because it's so hard to get up to the train from here as it is. Yet, I can totally understand why that might not be if the hub is planned to be in Peterborough, and I wouldn't want to jeopardize them having access either. So I think I need more information, and I don't think I can adequately answer this other than, of course, the NDP support electric rail, and of course we support expansion on infrastructure, and of course this would create more jobs. It would be good for everyone. It would be another step in the right direction towards climate action. So yes and no.
15th question. We'd like you now to comment on the status of Canada-U.S. relations. They are, of course, our closest and largest trading partner. How can they improve moving forward? First to respond in this issue, candidate Williams. You have 1 minute starting now.
You know, the U.S. is our largest trading partner. I think when it comes to tourism, we both share benefits, both from our snowbirds, and you'd know if you're going down to the U.S. and and traveling there every winter, and you've missed that the last 2 winters. And of course, when we draw people up here, of course, commercially, we have a lot of American companies in this region who provide a lot of jobs. And at the end of the day, we really need the U.S. and they need us. It's symbolic. And I think at the end of the day, this relationship seems to have soured in the last few years. Of course, with the president, perhaps, that we had in the relationship with our current prime minister, but surprisingly also with the new president and the prime minister. And it first was the canceling of Keystone XL. It's Line 5 that we're not getting any cooperation in. You know, we really need to see a mutual benefit and a partnership that's developed that benefits both countries, and we need to see that very shortly.
Answering second, candidate Ellis. You have 1 minute starting now.
I want to say that our relationship with the U.S. Government under Biden has been fantastic, and under Trump it was, well, a little rocky, but we got through it. We signed the free trade agreement, one of our biggest ventures in trade agreements in the last parliament with the U.S. It was a long, dragged-out affair, but we were able to solve it. We keep the U.S. as our friends and still as our biggest trading partner. We worked together in the U.S. on closing the borders, worked on U.S. with COVID-19, and we work on U.S. with many issues. They are our friends, they are our allies, and they are our partners, and we have a great relationship. Thank you.
Answering third, candidate Bell. You have 1 minute starting now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement that I think our relationship was definitely strained under the Trump administration, and I feel more confident now that Biden has been elected. He wasn't who I would have wanted, but he is, you know, he's better than some. And I think that speaks to our ability to how close our relationships are, because we so closely followed both of those candidates and other candidates, and what happens in the United States really affects what happens here in Canada. Our border is huge, and we need to continue to have a really collaborative, I think, relationship. And I think that it's so crucial that I think we work on climate action together, actually, because their issues are going to be our issues. We're on the same continent. We need to be collaborating in that sector as well, I think, really. That's all I want to say.
Final response on this question, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
I really think that we need to evaluate our situation in a relationship with the U.S. At this point, we base a lot of our decision making on examples from the States and initiatives that they're taking, which is great for the most part, but the fact is Canada is less than 35 million people. We equate our population to some small cities in the U.S., and we need to take our national identity away from being the 51st state and following suit from all the media influence and misinformation that's crossing the border and affecting the policy and decision making that is happening in Canada. While I respect the states and I have no personal issue, what I do have an issue with is that Canada is a petrol state because of the U.S. and our relationship is going to be tarnished dramatically as we move away from a fossil fuel economy and into a green economy, and we need to understand the reality of that, and dynamic of that relationship is going to change dramatically. We need to be prepared for it.
Gauging by time, what will likely be our last question of the evening is on defense spending. CFB Trenton is one of the largest and most important employers in our region. What would your government have in its future plans in terms of defense spending, and if possible, if you can equate that to what might happen or be invested in CFB Trenton, please do. First to answer this question will be candidate Ellis. You have 1 minute starting now.
When we first got into government, we looked at the defense, and we looked at a long-term plan on funding our military properly. As you're well aware, our military are the greatest men and women in the world. They helped during COVID, they helped go into nursing homes, and they help all around the world. Our defense plan is funded, fully funded, and as I said before, over 10 years, there'll be a rise in their budget of $70 billion over 10 years for a fully funded military. Thank you.
Second answer, candidate Bell. You have 1 minute starting now.
Okay, I just wanted to get this clear because I'm less, it's not that I don't care, but it's more, this is not my wheelhouse, so it's not something that I'm as familiar with. So I want to admit that out loud, and I wanted to make sure that I'm getting correctly for you what we were saying here. So my search function is sucking technical difficulties. Okay, what am I going to say about this? I want to make sure that if our military folks are doing this hard, difficult work that's dangerous, that they have the funding needed to have correct training, to have correct equipment, and that we're making sure that they are safe. I want to make sure that we move back to having peacekeeping as opposed to being more of a real, I don't know how to put that correctly. I want us to be more of a peacekeeper. I feel like we used to be that in the world, and I feel like we've lost that. We've lost sight of what our mission is.
And that's time.
Yeah.
Answering third candidate, Charlton, you have 1 minute starting now.
I think part of what you're trying to say, Steph, is that we are not an offensive country. We do not operate on the offense. We do not prioritize violence as solutions for international problems. Yes, most Canadians will say to you that we need to prioritize defense, and we need to make sure that Canada is secured internationally so that our borders are protected. The Green Party is suggesting that we reduce funding to the military and that we reconsider how the military is there to support us if we need fully trained professionals dealing with all of our issues. Because with Canada, we call upon the military to save us every time our first responders can't deal with the situation appropriately. And that is something that we can all count on, that when the fires are burning, when the cities are flooding, that the military will be there for us every single time. And we need to prioritize them for that.
Last response on this, which will be the last question before closing statements. Candidate Williams, you have 1 minute starting now.
If Aaron O'Toole was elected as our Prime Minister, he'd be the first veteran Prime Minister in Canada's history. Aaron's visited here in this riding, and he has stated how important CFB Trenton will continue to be under a Conservative government. He's pledged to put millions of dollars into CFB Trenton, and that would boost our entire economy. Thousands of personnel work at CFB Trenton in 8 Wing, and it benefits us in the millions every single year. We're going to put more money into the military. We're going to make sure we change a lot of the problems we're seeing right now in the military under the Liberal government, and we're going to ensure that the military are still strong, and we put emphasis on their value and a partnership and a relationship here in CFB Trenton and here in the Quinte region.
Candidate Ellis, brief rebuttal, you have 30 seconds.
And just to go back about funding to CFB Trenton, the last year the Harper government funding was cut for CFB Trenton, and under Aaron O'Toole as Veterans Minister, funding was cut for Veterans Affairs and offices closed. Thank you.
Response, Candidate Williams, 15
I didn't know
seconds.
Harper's running for Prime Minister this time. So, you know, Aaron O'Toole has promised, he promised funding and he's going to put funding in.
Close
So,
the building. He
well,
closed the Veterans
Harper's not
Canada
running,
Ellis.
sir. Aaron O'Toole is. So let's just stay to the facts.
He cut. What are you going to cut?
Nothing.
With that, and we have now reached the end of our question period, and it is time for our closing statements. We'll ask you to keep tight to your time because we are running tight to time for the end of this broadcast. You will each have 1 minute. There will be no attempts or granted rebuttals during your closing statements. We have 1 minute each. We'll begin with Candidate Ellis. You have 1 minute for your closing statement starting now.
When I first ran to be your member of parliament and represented our Bay of Quinte community, you knew my priorities were families, seniors, infrastructure, helping the middle class, and protecting the most vulnerable. Over the past 6 years, I've been proud to see our government bring over $450 million in federal funding to the Bay of Quinte to fight for these causes and more. We have seen unprecedented growth over the last 6 years, and I hope we continue to build on the work that brought us here. Having been born and raised in Belleville, I understand the local issues. A former small business owner like many throughout the community, I know what it takes to support the business community. As a father, I know how much investing in childcare will mean to our economy and for our families. As a son of a veteran, I brought forward a motion in the House of Commons to end veterans' homelessness and have fought every day for their individual cases. As Mayor of Belleville, my council and I invested in infrastructure and worked to solve our family doctor shortage to ensure we meet our region's growing needs. I'm not someone who's out of touch with what the community members are feeling. Community members know that they can come to me for a straight answer. We have built a better Bay of Quinte together. Now let's move forward to everyone. On September 20th, please vote for Neil Ellis so together we can continue building on our accomplishments. Thank you.
Second closing statement, Candidate Williams. You have 1 minute starting now.
It would be my greatest honor if I earned your vote and became your member of parliament for the Bay of Quinte. And I promise to be innovative, passionate, and to get the job done on all of the issues that plague us right now. We have to fix our housing situation, and like I said before, it's juggling because simultaneously we have to fix our jobs creating them and filling them. We have to ensure that we fix mental health. And all of this revolves around taking care of our seniors, making sure we invest in our veterans, and ensure we're taking care of this great area. I love the Bay of Quinte region. I have spent so much time invested in it, making sure we build it, making sure we wave the flag when we talk about bringing people here to live, people that are working here, and just finding this place for the first time visiting a winery or a brewery or the National Air Force Museum. I will work very hard to ensure we raise this area up. I will work hard for you. On September 20th, vote Williams and vote Conservative.
Third closing statement, candidate Charlton, you have 1 minute beginning now.
I don't think I could fit as many points into a minute as Neil Ellis, and I don't think that I could tell you what you want to hear as much as some of our other candidates. But what I will tell you is what you need to hear, and we need Canada to take an immediate action on the climate crisis, and we need to base all our policies going forward to create a social, secure safety net for everyone as we transition into that new green economy. So when I ask you tonight, when you have some time to think, what does Canada look like in the future? Put your Jetsons goggles on for a second and think about it. Are we an electric-run society? And if we are, when did that happen? Was it this year or next year or 10 years from now? Or are we still paying $10 a liter for gas? And where does that leave Canadians? What jobs are available in the future and what aren't? Where are we supporting Canadians in this transition? And this is what I want you to take into consideration when you go to vote on September 20th, is that are you voting for incremental changes that might be detrimental to your future?
And that's time. And with our final closing statement, candidate Bell, you have 1 minute starting now.
I'll just mention that if you think Erica and I have been really in agreement tonight, that's because I've known Erica 20 years. We were in high school together. I love her dearly. She's one of my closest friends. And we're going to agree on so much because we have the same values. And I'm with her. We need to invest in the future because climate action is coming. And we need to deal with that immediately. Not tomorrow, not in 20 years, today. So we need to invest at the same time in healthcare, affordable housing, Pharmacare, medicine for all. Everyone deserves to have medication. But we need to do these things in a prudent and meaningful way that involves climate action, that deals with those issues at the same time, so we're not leaving anyone behind in the process. And we're not making incremental small changes, just like Erica was saying, that we repeatedly vote for year after year, and we get nowhere. And this will be the defining moment of our century, I believe, that we did or did not deal with climate change. Thank you so much.
And that brings us to the end of this event. This has been Your Vote on Your TV. I'd like to thank all 4 candidates, as well as the people here at Your TV. Whether you do so in advance polls or on September the 20th, it is so important for you to get out and vote. Do the research, make your voice heard. This is the time when you have the power. Again, vote on September 20th. This has been Your Vote on Your TV.